Hey up everyone, how's it going? And in today's video we have yet another GPU review, and today's video is about the GTX 780 and more specifically a very strange one. More specifically, the Gainwood Phantom edition of the 780 has a very unique cooler where the fans are actually behind the actual fin stack. And it looks really strange, but to be fair, it actually cools surprisingly well, keeping the 780 around 80 degrees C, which isn't actually too bad for a 28nm process card. Launching back of May 2013, this card was very high end for the time, packed with 2,304 CUDA cores, which was a lot for the time, nothing compared to the Ampere cards today, which have about 10,000, but back in the day, 8 years ago, this was quite powerful. With the GK110 core and the 3GB of video memory, this was no slouch and it was a very high-end card. And all this could be yours for a price tag of $649 US. However, in 2021 there are some drawbacks to this card, and the main of that is being the lack of support, proper support that is, for DirectX 12. It supports it at just the normal level, it doesn't support it at a feature level. And that's a big problem because some games won't even launch, like Assassin's Creed Valhalla wouldn't launch. I tried to launch it, wouldn't have it. I believe there are workarounds, but I didn't try them and it's just one of them annoying things. Another big issue with it is only 3GB of video memory. This was at around the time just before when games started to utilise a lot more video memory, and it goes to show with only 3GB of GDDR5 on the card. Yeah, you're stuck at 1080p. But to be honest, with a card this old, you should be playing at 1080p and possibly lower. So besides all that, how does the GTX 780 perform in 2021? Today I've loaded up about 7 games to benchmark on my personal rig, which includes a 3950X, 32GB of Corsair Dominator Platinum memory, and an 850 watt power supply. First game up today is Warzone. From my experience, Warzone doesn't tend to be the most optimised of games. However, the GTX 780 performed pretty decently here. On the low preset, the 780 managed to get 61 FPS on average, and a 1% low of 42 FPS, and a 0.1% low of 23 FPS. The game was smooth and playable, hardly any stutters to speak of, and yeah, not bad performance here. Next game up is F1 2020, and as always, it performed really great. No issues here from the GTX 780 as it managed to get 71 FPS on average, and a 1% low of 59 FPS and a 0.1% low of 38 FPS. This was achieved on the high preset, and I recommend you use these settings. It's a massive increase in terms of frame rate over the very high preset for not a lot of quality drop either, so yeah, it's worth lowering down to these settings. The performance of Cyberpunk is hardly surprising, as the 780 is actually the minimum required graphics card to run this game. Well, according to the spec sheet, we've managed to get this to run pretty easily on a 770, so yeah. However, on the low preset with medium textures, the 780 managed to get 30 FPS on average, following that up with a 1% low of 23 FPS and a 0.1% low of 16 FPS. I'll be honest, the performance here wasn't too great, but it is Cyberpunk in the end of the day, and this game is far from optimised well. It's pretty bad. In this case, I'd probably recommend lowering it to 900p, where you might see better averages and better 0.1% lows and 1% lows. But at 1080p it is playable, but just about. Next game up is Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I wanted to test Valhalla, but because of the DirectX 12 issue, I couldn't. Other than that, performance here with the 780 was pretty good, to be fair, managing to get 39 FPS on average, along with a 1% low of 34 FPS and a 0.1% low of 30 FPS. All this was done on the high preset on the in-game benchmark, so it's pretty much as bad as it will get. I'd recommend lowering it down to medium, maybe keeping the high textures, because this graphics card can do it and you'll have a much better gaming experience that way, I think. Fortnite on the Pro settings, which is essentially low everything apart from draw distance, performed really well, with the GTX 780 getting 182 FPS on average, following that up with a 1% low of 99 FPS and a 0.1% low of 26 FPS. The actual performance was fine. Most of the stutters happened while I was jumping outside of the battle bus, and these stutters didn't get in the way of the gameplay, so great performance here. Red Dead Redemption 2 has always been a great test at how powerful a GPU actually is, and to be fair, the GTX 780 had quite a hard time with this one. With the low settings and medium textures, the 780 got 42 FPS on average, along with 33 FPS for the 1% low figure and 27 FPS for the 0.1% low. However, the game still looks pretty good and performs better than the console edition as well, so not too bad there. Last game up today is GTA 5, and as always, with old hardware it ran flawlessly. And on the very high preset with no advanced settings or MSAA, the GTX 780 managed to get 94 FPS on average. It also got 74 FPS for the 1% low and 68 FPS for the 0.1% low. It really does not take a lot to run this game. Like, I thought this game was way harder until I started benchmarking, and yeah, it's not really that hard to run GTA 5. Yeah, it's pretty much playable on anything considered mid-range that's launched in the past 8 years, so yeah, no issues here at all. So, after all that benchmarking, I believe the GTX 780 is starting to show its age. Don't forget, this card is actually 8 years old almost now. But I believe it still has some relevance in today's market, especially with all the scalpers and all the crypto miners going around, because the market still isn't recovering. It looks to be like it's getting worse. But yeah, so this card still has a place in today's market. And this brings me to the main question of today. Is the GTX 780 worth it in 2021? And I'd say no, probably not. Main reason being because of the 3 GB of VRAM, and the Kepler architecture hasn't aged well at all. Not to mention the bad DX12 support as well, so some games won't run, some games will. F1 I tested in DX12, that worked fine. Some games that actually use DX12 features, like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, don't work. I think you can do workarounds, but I'm not too sure, so leave it up to your own will. But yeah, it doesn't have a lot of future technology in there, it's just aging quite a bit now. So in 2021, I think you should be paying around 50 quid for this card, no more than that really, because anything more than that is a bit high. And if you're still rocking one, you're happy to keep it if you're happy with the performance, if you don't mind lowering some settings. It was quite a good performer, to be fair. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there. So if you like the video, like it. If you want to see more tech content in the future, feel free to drop a subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.